There's a difference between intelligence activities and law enforcement activities, right? So the goal of law enforcement is to ensure like societal norms, and police officers, the FBI, their function, the deterrence of law enforcement is threat of consequence. When you're operating in conflict, there's rules for conflict to be sure. I'm just saying that intelligence operates in gray areas because the people they're fighting at aren't lawful combatants, like the IRGC, which is a terrorist organization, very much by definition, a unlawful combatant. And so, if you're going to try and stand up similar lawful, unconventional forces, there's certain things you have to meet. There's a reason I said that having like the Shah be recognized as the official government of Iran in exile, or at least have the Shah lead a transition government panel that may include other elements of the opposition, which I understand is not palatable. That would then free up a lot of, that would make the legislative and legal avenues of providing lethal assistance very, very streamlined. Then you can do for Iran what we did for Ukraine. That includes things like long range strike munitions and stuff that could do exactly what you said.
And Jeffrey, I messaged you on WhatsApp, so I'm waiting for your response. And I don't know if you got that a couple of days ago. All right, so regarding that, really, you didn't get it? I'm pretty sure I responded to you. Can you message me again? Oh yeah, I sent you a voice message. Yeah, okay, you're gonna check that. Okay. All right, so
Armin, you had raised your hand not long ago. Did you already cover what you wanted to say?
no, I didn't. I'm gonna talk about inbreeding, guys. Let's talk about inbreeding.
Finally, this
So
part of the show. Okay.
yes. So again, something that people talk about, cousin marriage and inbreeding in the UK is rising, and people are talking about it as something interesting and barbaric and backwards that is coming to the UK. But again, let's talk about the civilizational changes that this is going to cause. It's not just like something, I mean, it is ridiculous, but it's actually quite devastating, and the impacts of it are okay. So let me actually go through this. So let me give you a historical context. Cousin marriage was banned by the church in the medieval period and disappeared from the West, but has reemerged with migration from South Asia and the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa. So in the UK, right? So in Islam, the practice is not only allowed, but it's encouraged because the prophet married his first, the prophet in Prophet Muhammad in Islam, he married his first cousin. And when Muhammad does something, it's sunnah means it's the way, like it's good. So it's not just permissible. When prophet does something, that means it's beyond just okay. It means that it's something that we should see as a role model. So it's not mandatory, obviously, to marry your cousin, but it's seen as something positive because Muhammad did it. So remember, the sources of Islamic teachings is the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran is the revelation from God. The Sunnah is what Muhammad said and did. What he said is called the Hadith, right? And what he did, you could look at the Hadith and the Sirah to see what he did. So in Bradford, nearly 50% of Pakistani mothers are married to a cousin. That's crazy. British Pakistanis are 3 to 4% of births, but account for 30% of children with rare recessive genetic disorders. Risk of birth defects doubles from 2 to 3% to 4 to 6%. And again, beyond defects, you also have a lowering of IQ because of this. 40% of child death in Bradford were linked to genetic conditions. Over half of those had parents who were cousins. So health impacts, this is not the main part. I'm just going to mention this part, but then I'm going to go to the main part. So children survive with lower development outcomes, speech difficulties, and require one third more medical appointments. So basically, we're lowering the average IQ of the UK by doing this, right? And the NHS and Labour Party are accused of ignoring or defending the practice, calling it culturally sensitive to avoid losing Muslim votes. Okay, so this is what's happening. Now, I just want to mention that the significance of this, because this is not just like, oh, Muslim inbreeding, like a durka durka, it's beyond that, right? So high rates of cousin marriage in Bradford and the associated cost, like again, this is just an example. This is a report that came out, but it's everywhere, right? So the cost associated with this is going to come, like, it's not like a lot of people watch this are like, oh, okay, so they're going to become they're going to have lower IQ, they're going to have disorders. Yeah, this is bad, but it has nothing to do with me. But it's going to have everything to do with you. The cost associated with all of this is going to come out of your wallet. This is a huge strain on the welfare state. The economic cost of treating rare genetic disorders is basically 33% more medical appointments, as we mentioned, disproportionately drains the NHS. In a geopolitical sense, a nation with a strained healthcare system is less resilient. A lot of people don't understand how much healthcare cost is a significant part of the strength of a nation as a whole. So we talk about health, and we talk about health as this just like, oh, people need to be healthy in a society, as if like it just sounds like something positive to say, right? But both from an economic perspective and from a strength of a nation as a whole perspective, an unhealthy nation is a weak nation, and you will experience this economically and your relative strength to the rest of the countries in the world significantly in the long term. And again, remember, I also mention this every time when we're talking about birth. There's a shadow electorate here. I pronounce that right. The Muslim vote campaigns success in unseating politicians over Gaza shows that a distinct, cohesive voting bloc can dictate foreign policy. So it's not just a numbers game. So I mentioned that there are going to be the demographic change in European countries is going to create voting blocks that is not just going to change your foreign policy, but also your internal policy. These are people that will be voting in line with views that makes a society a lot weaker. This is not a demographic known for voting for in line with values that we consider classical liberal values and values that empirically have proven to make a society stronger. So that is going to weaken. But now, how is that relative to inbreeding? A lower IQ demographic is easier to manipulate and control and make them all vote in the direction that, I don't know, the imams or the religious leaders would want. So it's not just that they're not higher in number, they're also lower in IQ, and which means that mobilizing them in one direction or another is going to become a lot easier. So the Labour Party is effectively held hostage. It must appease this bloc to win. So if you keep blaming the Labour Party, they're actually doing what they're supposed to do and get votes. The problem is that the demographic has changed to a degree where if they ever want to have any chance, it's going to be that all other parties are also going to be forced to take this block seriously, because more people need to understand how influential a small percentage of the population is going to be when they vote. You know what I mean? So you might think, like, you might have 5% of the population that, from a democratic perspective, they have as much influence as 20% or 30, because they're all thinking like, we are on the same mission, we're going to vote for this, we all agree that any politician that doesn't agree with this is going to be punished by us not voting for it. This is how you get 5% being as effective as 20%, or 15% being as effective, I don't know, as 40 or 50%. So you're going to see even some of maybe your if this continues, some of your favorite parties at some point will have to bend the knee to this voting bloc because of the level of influence they have when it comes to deciding which politicians to support and which ones to punish. So Again, this is mostly visible when it comes to UK's foreign policy stance, because the issue of Palestine and Gaza, Gaza and Israel, is so obvious and you could see it. But again, when it comes to internal politics, the effect is going to be much harder to notice, but it's going to be even more deadly. It's going to be more deadly when it comes to foreign policy. These are stuff that makes it into the news when you have politicians, I don't know, condemning Israel, or I don't know, supporting the independent, like Palestine becoming a state. That is visible, it's news, it grabs attention, like, oh my god, this voting bloc is giving us the worst foreign policy stance. But what doesn't get enough attention is that the same voting bloc would vote in a way that your internal policies will challenge the very foundations of what made Western civilization great. So basically, the foreign policy is like a canary in the mine for your internal policies, also going in a direction that will support the values that doesn't make a society great, right? So the refusal to address the medical data due to cultural sensitivity is also a canary in the mine, because it's basically a bending of the need to this voting bloc, and it suggests the state is prioritizing short-term social peace over long-term public health. And the truth, a sign of a weakening sovereign, which is again indication for them bending the knee on a whole bunch of other things to come in the future. Anyways, so that was my rant on inbreeding in the UK. This was my TED talk. Hope you enjoyed it. All right.
Okay, I'm curious, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Were they low IQ and then started inbreeding, or was it inbreeding, then low IQ, repeat?
That's a good question. I don't know. I
We
think
know
it's
the mom
circular.
was illiterate, so maybe it's low IQ inbreeding.
Mhm.
Danny, you are next.
Okay. Hi. Okay. About the exchange rate of real to USD, if the exchange rate open to the people gives fewer reals to the dollar, does this fake exchange rate incentivize Iranians to do business with each other in US dollars? And is such behavior prevented by the state? So,
Yeah.
if I understand correctly, the exchange rate that people can use, like not tied to the regime, gives less reals per dollar. Is it beneficial for them to just directly trade goods for US dollars? And is that
That
controlled?
would be beneficial, and I don't think the state would allow that. Yeah.
Hmm, okay.
Yeah.
And also, you said earlier you were writing an article debunking all the lies about Pahlavi, and I'm kind of interested in putting on paper some debunking of everything about the Palestinian narrative just for the sake of my own sanity. So maybe if you're thinking of making a website, those could go together somehow. I can't guarantee that I'll
Yeah.
do the best job and be the most qualified on every topic, but A, I'm willing to do it, and B, I hope editing something is easier than writing from scratch.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Maybe we could have a website that we becomes our project here, and we will keep adding more pages. So
Yes,
like a fact
yes.
sheet.
I'm picturing
Yeah.
like the two lions, like that picture of
Yeah. Okay.
the flag of the king
And we
and
could,
the Israeli flag, because we're
yeah,
both
this
standing
this
for
is
the
this is
same thing.
that's a great idea. By the way, Steph, you started this. So we could have this could be the project of, because I mean I wanted this community to at some point have a project, like not just talking, right? So this could be our project. And it could keep expanding. We could have like a fact sheet on, different topic, a fact sheet on Pahlavi, a fact sheet on Palestine, and a fact sheet on something else. Eventually we keep growing it. I keep adding more pages.
I think if Iran is free, most of the Palestinian narrative will get exposed.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm pretty naive at this point. But just because right now there's Iranians dying, it feels more important. But yeah, no, I totally get it's it's a good idea.
Right.
The causes are so connected. It's very like poetic almost if you look back into history. I never thought like it's very symbolic and it has so much meaning to the West, and the West is literally getting brainwashed by Muslim Brotherhood. So it's really crazy time. They need
At some
information.
point at some point we might have to provide, like, give refugee status to people from the West trying to leave their Islamic
100.
countries, like come to Iran, because Iran is secular and I don't know, UK is Sharia law, and I don't
Pretty,
know, like
yeah, pretty
BT would
much.
be on the. Yeah, I will endorse. I will sponsor BT.
I'm already planning to divorce my husband and marry Nare if need be for a citizenship, but I will think of you as a sponsor if I need it.
But BT, you have Israel. You already have Israel.
True. That's
Yeah.
true.
Okay.
If I don't want to run from bombs every day, by then we shouldn't have to, right?
I'm
Right.
pretty sure once Iran is free, Israel also doesn't like have to run away from bombs by that.
Okay.
We
And
always going to have to run the bombs in Israel. It's just less.
Maybe it would be a good idea to launch this website on Purim because it connects the two.
See,
I know. I don't know.
we'll see.
I just feel like it's so relevant right now, and I just don't want what happened on January
Not with
17th to happen
AI.
again. Like, it can't happen again.
AI
So,
will
like,
bang
people
out
need to
your
know better.
website just like that.
finally,
Sorry.
on the list, we have a question from the chat. When Iranians say 57ist, what do they mean? I only heard about it in X Spaces last year. I wish to know where it originated from. It seems to be to the advantage of the Islamic regime to place a blanket label on a generation, but I do not know much.
Okay, that label is not on a generation; it's on an ideology. So it's not on a generation. I mean, there are people from that generation who support Princess of Pahlavi, and if you're from the okay, so let me actually give context for people, right? So the Persian calendar is different from the Gregorian, obviously, right? And the year that the Islamic Revolution happened was 1979, but for on the Persian calendar it was 1357, right? So when we say Pancho Hefty, it means that people with the ideology of 57, with that mindset, right? So a lot of people think that we're talking about that generation, but obviously anybody from that generation who supports Princess of Pahlavi will not be called a Pancho Hefty, right? The and I think it's actually a very helpful categorization of all the ideas that we're against. Because anti Islamic or anti Islamic Republic is not enough. Panjo Hafti covers the people that we're against that are not part of the Islamic Republic, or maybe not even Islamic, right? So let me actually give you a list of all the people that we're against, right? So there are some people who support Khamenei, right? And obviously, that would be in this category. There are some people who don't support Khamenei, but they support Khomeini and the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Right? So they support Khomeini's government, but not Khamenei's government. They think Khomeini was like amazing, but Khamenei ruined the Islamic Republic. So, for example, Mir Hossein Mousavi is one of those people. That will still be part of the Panjo Hefty category. There are people who believe that both Khamenei and Khomeini are shit. They ruined the revolution, but the revolution was a good idea. The revolution was a good idea. Like the 1979 revolution was a good cause because Iran was occupied by imperialists, like a puppet of the imperialist West. Monarchy is evil, capitalism is evil, Westernism is evil, Zionism is evil. Muhammad Reza Shah was basically aligned with all of these evil forces. So the revolution was right. We should have been toppling the Shah, but Khomeini and Khamenei basically fucked up a really good cause, right? So this category of people, they should be included as like just and now these people. So this is the third category. The first category, Khomeini is good, the revolution is good. Second category, Khomeini good. Seth, wait, let me finish this thought, Seth. So yeah, Khomeini bad, Khomeini good, revolution good. Last category is very important to include because this last category of people are, a lot of times they fool Westerners as being on the right side because they're both against Khomeini. Right now, they go out and they consider to be opposition to the Islamic Republic. They hate the Islamic Republic, and people are like, "Oh, okay, so they hate the Islamic Republic, so they must be the good guys." Well, no, because they were on the side of the revolution before, and they continue to be on the side of the revolution now, especially when the revolution had a more leftist branding than an Islamic branding. A lot of people don't know that the revolution of 1979 was not very Islamic until the very last phase of it. It was a Marxist revolution, and it didn't have that many Islamic people involved until very close to the end. And all of a sudden became an Marxist Islamic revolution, and then it continued to be Marxist Islamic even to after it succeeded. And the Marxists were like, okay, these like Islamic barbarians, we will use them to kill all our enemies, and eventually we will be in charge. Like they had a like the leftists had a they had this idea that we were the elites of the revolution. We were the educated ones who read theory, read Marx, and we will appeal to the educated people. But obviously, the common people need somebody to need to be managed as well. So we will use the mullahs and their network of mosques to mobilize them, right? And obviously, these mullahs, they don't know how to do politics. So once we win, obviously we will be the people in charge. Okay. And even after the revolution, you could see them. They like many of the leftists were still in charge. Like a lot of people think once the revolution was successful, immediately the mullahs were in charge. That was not the case. For a while, the leftists were still in charge, and they were basically cheering on the mullahs with the executions. They're like, oh, okay, go execute this, go execute that. And the mullahs were executing everybody, and the leftists were basically cheering them on. And then once they were done with the execution list, they were like, okay, now it's your turn. So they started going after the very people who put them in charge. And they started executing the Marxists. And honestly, the leaders might have, like, I'm not going to be sad for the leaders, but a lot of them didn't deserve it because they were just young kids who didn't know what the fuck they were doing. So many of them didn't deserve it, right? And I consider them victims. This is why I'm saying all of this. When you say Pancho Hefty, you're basically looking at a category of people who might not, some of them support the Islamic Republic, some of them hate the Islamic Republic. But we consider them the enemy because they have values, they have all the values that has ruined Iran in the past 47 years. You could this doesn't exhaust all their values, but you could identify them as people, if you want to quickly see if they're a Panjahafti or not. If they're anti-Zionist, they're probably in this category. If they're anti-Western, they're probably in this category. If they're anti-capitalism, they're probably in this category. If they're anti-Pahlavi, they're probably in this category, right? And usually the Venn diagram with all of these closely matches. Like if you're in one, if one of these is a check mark for you, probably the other ones are also a check mark for you. But this basically captures the chant that the Iranians have when they say death to the three corruptions. The Marg bar Fasid Mullah Chapi Mujahid. So this is the chant. This is a very popular chant in Iran. Death to the three corruptions, the mullahs, the leftists, and the MEK. So the mullahs, the leftists, and the MEK is basically another way of saying Panjo Hafti, which basically is a label with the people with these types of idea. These days, we could consider anybody, the easiest way to determine who belongs in this category is whether or not they oppose Princess of Pahlavi and his plan. And if they do, we will consider them a Panjahafti, and we will consider them to be on the side of the Islamic Republic, either either knowingly or unknowingly. It doesn't matter. Like some of them are unknowingly on the because unknowingly under they consider not to be on our side. And I think that's a very helpful categorization, and it's not based on generation, it's based on values. Did I answer that question? Like, was there anything that I missed? The person who was asking, were you happy with that response?
They look very happy.
Okay, okay.
Okay, you have about 4 minutes left, so that was the end of our list. If you have anything else you
Can I
want to,
just say, it's kinda scary because it's like, I don't know, it reminds me of, like, even just in the US, like, always hearing commies talk about, like, we need to form alliances with disaffected groups and bring them into the struggle for, like, communism and, you know,
So, how? So, explain. Can you elaborate? How is that, like, link it together so I understand?
like, I don't know, it's just, common, like, you'll always hear things like, "Oh, we need to, like, you know, like, disaffected group like, we need to, like, bring in immigrants into our movement and convince them that the key to, like, making sure that they're safe in the US and don't get rounded up by ICE is, like, fighting for the common cause of, like, a communist US or, like, Black Lives Matter
Oh,
activists and, like, that stuff and, like, bring them into the,
so
struggle
they're
for, like
using the suffering. They're using the
yeah.
people who feel like they are being oppressed as
Mhm.
their sense of being oppressed as a way to try to bring them to under communism. So you're saying, oh,
Exactly.
so what
Yeah.
you're witnessing in the West is similar to what happened in Iran. So
Yeah,
the Islamists, they consider the West to be
and
evil.
yes, and
So
they
the
consider
communists
Muslims
were
to be
trying.
oppressed and yeah.
Yes, I mean, yeah, same strategy. That was the exact same strategy. All right,
Armin, can I
guys.
ask you
So
about that?
yeah.
The just if there's any such thing as like a graphic or some sort of thing that explains all the different groups that you were just talking about? Because like I wonder, because you were saying there's some people that like hominy and some people like hominy or whatever, and which one's more extreme, and then you like go from like the most extreme to the least extreme in terms of like, because I think people don't understand the West doesn't know anything about Islam, at least from last time when I most of my life, and I want people to know the differences because and I learned it from Dahlia, who was explaining like the 2 billion is Islam and how she's like a certain kind that's very like spiritual. And she's like had to flee Egypt and everything. And she's talking about all these extremists and all these words just sort of all go together. And I wonder if there's some sort of like thing that just to understand the different parties that are all talking to everyone about Iran in terms of what they actually stand for. Does that exist or no?
So when it comes to the groups that I mentioned, it's not about, so it's they're all pretty extreme. It's not about level of extremism. It's about the brand of extremism, right? So,
Okay.
but
Hmm.
when it comes, yeah, when it comes to Dahlia, okay, I love her, by the way, and
Me
I had
too.
her on my show. I love
She's the
her.
best.
Okay,
She's the
The-
best.
but but her Islam is not. I told her this. Okay, I talked to her about her beliefs. Her Islam is not Muhammad's Islam. Her Islam is Dahlia's Islam. I told her, because she's such a good person, I told her she's such a nice person, and she could not accept Muhammad's version of Islam. So she has made her own version of Islam, and she believes in that. The Islam that she believes in has nothing to do with the real Islam.